Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larbi.
Welcome back to another episode. I'm Sarah Larbi and you are listening to Where Should I Invest? Today's guest is James Burchill. I actually met James when I got into his smart car for the very first time. We were actually shooting a show called Coffee Confidential, which was actually really interesting, really fun. Basically, we drive around with coffee in our hands and we talk about passive income. And in my case, it was real estate, but there's lots of great guests with different forms of income that get to sit and talk about how to create that passive income without trading your time for money. And that's actually what we talk about on today's show. And I hope you enjoy it. But basically, I will say that, you guys are listening to this, you're listening to this because you want to create a different source of income to be able to be free from time, not having to spend the time with a job, with making somebody else rich. So, think about ways that you can create your own passive income, that you can make things happen for you, your family, and take some of that control back. And James is really good. I mean, he's been teaching how to create courses, how to create the passive income so that you can, over time, leave your job. Now, real estate is definitely one of those ways. There's other ways as well, as you guys will see and hear in the show. And I will say James is I'm a little bit envious, but he was my inspiration for many times where I was looking and he was like out in like Florida, or he was like enjoying, he goes away for like a month or two out of the year. And one of the things when I used to have a job, I was like, wow, like, I want to be able to have that type of freedom where I can work from wherever. And is it really work if you're enjoying it and you love it? Probably not. So I will say that creating side hustles and creating passive income is going to be critical in freeing ourselves and freeing yourself from that 9 to 5, from having to be somewhere specific. And of course, at some point we'll be able to travel again and not have to quarantine for 2 weeks when we come back. And, I hope you enjoy life, and I hope you can enjoy it and say, I've built passive income, I've built courses, I've built different types of income streams where now I'm not relying on just one thing. So as you guys know, of course, I have my real estate, but there's other income streams I think is important. I also loan out my money as a different income stream, for example, as well, and a few others. So, have more than one or two different income streams, because you never know when one is going to stop or change, and you will need to make sure that you've got other ones to help carry you through. So on that note, guys, I hope you enjoy today's podcast with James Burchill. James, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on. Now, I met you back maybe a couple years ago in your smart car, when you were hosting the Smart Car Coffee Confidential show, and I had a super fun time and was really excited to speak to you about creating income through real estate. But you are the side hustle guy. You are the creating passive income. And so for those people listening to this that don't know who you are, can you give us an idea of what it is that you do?
I've been kind of hooked on creating, now predominantly digital products, information products, since I was quite young, when I sort of started getting paid for writing articles and then getting royalties from that, and then software. And so these days I still create courses, I still create software, pretty much anything I can turn into a digital product that will yield some kind of recurring sort of annuity is what keeps me interested.
Awesome. So basically, as a real estate investor, if you're looking at creating courses, for example, and monetizing in different aspects of more than just the cash flow and the appreciation and mortgage pay down from real estate, but just creating different things that you can monetize and different streams of income. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing that a lot of people get, if they're thinking about courses, a lot of people shy away from them because they think who am I to teach? It's the imposter syndrome. They think, it has to be big. I mean, most people's experience with anything educational was either, college and school. And the way that that information is taught to you is not the way that adults learn. It's not the way that we want to be taught. And most of the time, we don't want to spend 4 years learning something. That was kind of how we had to do it before. Now we want something that we can consume maybe in 90 minutes or 2 hours. Now, I'm not saying you can learn brain surgery in 2 hours, but you can learn to solve 1 or 2 problems in that kind of time frame. And people look for what we call, or I call, sort of short courses or quick courses that are practical and tactical. So if you were talking about real estate, it might teach you, how to sort of set up your bank accounts properly, or it might teach you how to put together a Rolodex of all the right people, or it might teach you how to manage a small portfolio, or at least how to set up the information structure so that you don't feel overwhelmed by all the information and keeping track of things. It doesn't have to be massive, but it does have to be meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think that's one extra thing under your tool belt in order to retire early. I mean, my actual last day of the job world is October 1st. And, real estate was super helpful, but it's additional. And, it's not just about having the real estate as the only source of income. I think you've helped me a lot too with some of the courses, putting that together and monetizing it. So it's like, okay, great, I've replaced my income and the real estate helps a ton, but it's additional streams of income of different things that you can do. And some are more hands-on than others. So I think that's really smart. Now, question for you, because you've had many guests on your show, Smart Car Coffee Confidential, and this is what you do. But somebody listening to this saying, okay, I want to get started, to that next step for retirement or to be able to replace my income. And I've got a handful of properties. I can teach some things. Like, what's the next step for them to try to monetize even more?
One of the first things I'll tell people is write down what you're good at, write down what you love, and then write down what you've identified people are looking for. And what you want to do is find the nexus or the crossover point of all three. Because if you can do that, you've actually found something that people are willing to pay for, something you actually enjoy doing, and something you have the knowledge to teach. So it's really a piece of paper and a pen, and start scribbling. And again, try not to get in your own way about thinking, well, who am I to know, to teach this? Again, you only need to know about 10% more than the person you're teaching, because we're all on a journey. I mean, I know an awful lot about an awful lot of little things, and I know nothing about everything else. So I've always said to people, I'm an expert in sort of a niche that's like an inch wide and like 10 miles deep. But beyond that, dumb as a bag of hammers. So it's like, try not to be overwhelmed by it all, because just because somebody's brilliant at one thing doesn't mean they're brilliant at everything.
Yeah. And, the other thing I would also add is it doesn't have to be like real estate courses, right? So like if you've got like a full-time job and you are really good at cooking, which I am not, right? But you want to, create some really fun things online and some courses on like how people that don't know how to cook can get started. Like I'm just giving you an example, but you can monetize that, and it doesn't have to be about real estate. You can just keep doing your real estate and find something that you're passionate about, like you mentioned, that you're good at, and teach that, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned cooking. I was looking around online recently. I'm always working on courses. I'm always writing stuff. And I came across an announcement of a fairly new course creator. So I think this was either their first or second. And it was this lady that likes to cook. And I like to cook too, but she likes to do desserts. And in particular, I think it was candied apples. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Anyway, her first course, she apparently did something like 23,000 US selling a short course on how to make candied apples. And I'm sitting there going, I'm in the wrong business. I have to go for a different niche. I teach tech and how to sort of, streamline your time and stuff using software. But yeah, there's so many niches. I mean, honestly, follow your passion, like match it up with a problem. And you're usually on solid ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one thing that I've always admired about you, and unfortunately I was hoping to copy you this year, but it's not going to happen, is you always go away in the coldest months of the year and get out of this cold weather.
Yeah.
Not so much now. However, the passive income and what you've created has allowed you to get there. So let's take a step back and walk us through, maybe talk to us about how you started off and created that passive income and how that all came about.
Well, when I was a young boy, my parents moved around a lot. And so this is the mid 1970s. And they bought me a computer. my parents at the time were fairly, well-to-do, because buying a computer in the 70s was extraordinarily expensive. And I got my hands on a computer and I started programming and writing, because I always wanted to be a writer, and I'd always wanted to be a programmer. And I kind of see them as two things, just slightly different versions of each other. And I started writing stuff. And of course, I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I think I was 7 or 8 at the time. And I started submitting my rather childlike submissions to newspapers, and I was printing these things out and sending them off. And then one day somebody turned around and had sent me a check for like £150. Back then, that was a fair amount of money. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I've just turned a thought into money. That was what occurred to me at that point. And then not long after that, I think I was 9, I sold software. I started selling software, and I started getting paid these recurring payments because of this thing called licensing and royalties. And it just blew my mind. It's like, hang on a sec, thought through my fingers into something, and then people keep paying you. And then I got really, really hooked on the idea of work once, get paid forever. This concept of, there's no such thing as truly passive income, because you still got to look after it.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that you can invest a lot of time and energy up front, kind of put it where it needs to be, and then for months, years, many cases, many years, it just keeps kicking off income. It's nice and steady. It might fluctuate a bit, but it's that's the way it works. And being fascinated with this idea, I thought, okay, and I put all my heart and soul into something really big, and it just tanked. And I thought it was soul destroying, right? And so I thought, well, this is kind of silly. My chances of hitting one out of the park are and low. So then I realized I needed to start creating small and fast and fail fast. So I started thinking, don't think in terms of creating 1, think in terms of creating 10. Then if you throw 10 out there, 1 or 2 catch, away you go. And that was my strategy. I immediately dialed everything back. I stopped thinking huge, and I started creating these small, rapidly producible solutions focused on writing, and I focused on software and anything digital. And that's what kind of got me going. And then of course I fell into a technical career for the last 35. And I've been playing around in that ever since, either writing courses or writing books or teaching, anything to do with words, and how you can play around with them, whether they're in a computer or otherwise. And that's really what got me started. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, that's really cool. You said a lot of things. I have a lot of questions, but as you're going through this, I'm thinking, okay, what are you doing with these courses? Like, where are you putting them? How are you getting that traction for people to find you? I mean, just starting from scratch, right? If somebody was to go out and get started, how does that even happen?
Well, it's incredibly noisy out there, and every day more and more people are going online. And because we've democratized publishing, I came from a publishing background as well. I still am in publishing. Publishers used to control the world. Now they think they still do, but they don't. The reality is that we all do, and we can publish pretty much anywhere. User-generated content. YouTube is a platform of user-generated content. So what you need to do is get clear on your message and start looking around. But more importantly, you're going to find people collect on certain online channels talking about the problem that you maybe have a solution for. And so you can find places where they hang out. Now, the thing you want to do is you actually want to give before you ask, and you want to listen before you speak, because the arrogance of information is that we think we know what people want, especially since we're creators. And the reality is, most of the time you're wrong. So usually it's tread lightly, listen, pay attention, go find the groups that have the problems, do your research. It doesn't take very long, and then sort of sit back and then begin to be useful. And then they will welcome you in. And at the same time, you can start broadcasting on general purpose channels. Like, I love YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the Western world. And I say the Western world because when you go out towards the East, YouTube and Google, they're like itty bitty little dots compared to the Asian market. Right. So focusing for us, it's massive. In fact, one of the nice things about YouTube is if you actually start typing in the kind of problems that you're sort of helping to solve, it tells you all the things that people are searching for, and you get massive traffic if you get it right. Mm-hmm. Until about a few months ago, I had the #1 video on YouTube for how to make how to make a video out of PowerPoint. It's like racked up over 500,000 views.
Nice.
I mean,
So
it's
do
just,
you monetize? Do you monetize from YouTube right now?
I do.
How
They
does
changed
that work?
So it used to be that you had to have a certain amount of viewing minutes. And then a couple of years ago, a somewhat well-known social media bad boy went and filmed something and posted something on YouTube that was against their rules. So YouTube cracked down and said, all right, fine. And they punished him and a lot of other people, myself included, and they demonetized me, and they took away along with like thousands of other people, they took away our rights to monetize until we hit a new bar. So the new bar is this: you have to have 1,000 followers on your YouTube channel, and you have to have over a certain number, I think it's 4,000 hours of viewing time a year. Now, my problem wasn't the viewing time. I was getting 40,000 minutes a month. So I was way past the requirement for viewing, but I'd never bothered to worry about subscribers. So I think I had like 250 subscribers. I was more interested in being found and watched rather than trying to, artificially jack up my count. It took me a year to sort of systematically grow the remaining 750. And I get about 100 to 200 subscribers a month now. It's not huge growth. And this year, that we're recording this has been a slow year for many, but yeah, it's still chugging along. Actually, I just broke 2,500. That's not a huge number by any stretch of the imagination, but you only needed 1,000 to monetize. So yeah.
So what do you want to, like, is it just ads that you can put in there and then they just pay you, what is it, per click or just per?
It depends. You can put a whole bunch of different ads in there. You really are going to get rich off it. Like for every 1,000 views, I think it's like something, it ranges between $3 and $10. Okay. They'll pay you. So, I think my videos right now getting around 50,000 views a month. So you can do the math. It's not a lot, like a couple $100.
It's not what brings you to, a warm country every single year. That's it's one of many things.
That's the thing, right? Mm-hmm. If you try and let's just say worst case scenario, you become super successful on one thing. It's the most dangerous thing out there, because all of your revenue is coming from a single source. There was an old story I was told a long time ago, and it said if more than 20% of your revenue comes from a single source, that source controls your future. If they turn the spigot off and the money stops, you are done. So I've always been about multiple streams of passive income, some coming in, some going out, some growing, some shrinking. I don't like losing them, but it's the nature of the beast. Some grow and some die. But if you've got a diversified portfolio and bits and pieces switch off and switch on, it doesn't hurt. If you've got it all in one basket and you lose the basket, that hurts.
Yeah, it's like you see these people that are like super famous on Instagram, but they may not have a website as an example, so they're not capturing any of that stuff. And at some point when Instagram is no longer as relevant, let's hope that they have enough at that point in time. Or you see some people that have like this awesome YouTube show, and then where else can you really find them? And they're monetizing YouTube. But again, hopefully it keeps going and it keeps growing, but things change, and well, technology always evolves.
Oh, well, that's the only constant. Technology. So the joke is the only constant is change, and it's literally always changing. And the advice has always been, and this hasn't changed in over 25 years when it comes to publishing, digital publishing. I've been in this since the internet was officially declassified, and they made it a public platform in 1994. Prior to that, it was a military. A military project. But the thing is that if you're on somebody else's platform, you're essentially a tenant. And unless you own the platform, you really are a tenant. And they can choose. In some cases, they just change the rules. In some cases, the government changes the rules for them. The number one piece of advice was always get someone's email address. And now the advice these days is get someone's email address. And if you can get their mobile phone number, get that too. Sure, get them on all the platforms you can get them on. Great, build your business on Facebook. Use YouTube, become a little titan in that area. But if you forget to capture an email address or a phone number, the day that platform decides to deplatform you, or it goes away, or someone, heavy leader in another country decides, for instance, they're going to ban a social media platform, TikTok, for instance, this year. That one's still on a knife edge. That could just go away overnight. What do you do? Well, if you've got an email address and you've got a list, you've got essentially one of the most valuable assets out there. Because what most people don't know about an email list is that every name on your list is worth, depending on how you monetize it, somewhere between, I think it's, hang on, let me just do the math right. I think somewhere between $1 and $100 per name per month. Now, I know that's a wide range, but each name is worth something to you. So if you've got an email list of a few thousand people and it's worth $1 a name, you should be making at least a couple of $1,000 a month in recurrent revenue. And if you really know how to structure it, you should be making many thousands of dollars a month, every month on autopilot, which is why people go after email addresses. Yay,
Right.
social media. I don't care.
Well, it's just one of those extra things, right? I mean, if somebody is listening to this thinking, I'm going to do a course, and it doesn't have to be on real estate investing, it could be on anything that they're good at, and they start capturing that audience, right? That whether it's on a website and you've got like a freebie that they can download as an example. I mean, that's a great way to capture an email address. James, I don't know if there's anything else that you can think of. I mean, I'm not the expert into this stuff, but.
So that Chatbot Forge, hence the t-shirt, is a new company I started this year. Again, it's in software, and my business partner and I, we are developing artificially intelligent powered chatbots. So same stuff as before. It's all about marketing automation, but now we've got these chatbots. Well, the nice thing about chatbots is those things are on all these different platforms, like Facebook Messenger, for instance, or I'm blanking now, Telegram, and all the other major platforms. The nice thing about it is you don't need to work as hard to get contact information from anyone, because all the information tends to be kindly collected by the social media platform, and it requires a few clicks. You don't even technically need to ask now for them to type stuff in. So capturing information is even quicker, even using QR codes, even using audio clips. And it's just so easy to start stitching this stuff together to get the contact information. So you can begin to have a conversation with people. Again, that's key. You want to talk to people. You don't want to sell them. Nobody likes to, nobody likes to be sold. Everybody likes to buy.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to figure out, like you said in the beginning, like what is their need? And then you've got to put in your deposits and put in your deposits. I mean, the first, I don't know how long I was doing my podcast. I was just doing my podcast. Like I actually started my podcast not even with a plan of monetizing it. I was just like, there's not a whole lot of Canadian podcasts out there. I need to start throwing some out. And then, by providing the advice, I think just people will come for different reasons. Right. And I've got students from it. I've got courses that were created from it. I've got, podcast sponsors, and that's great. I mean, it wasn't the goal of doing it. Maybe it should have been from the beginning. I could have done it more efficiently.
Actually, it's probably why you're successful, because if you follow the money and you think, what's the thing that's going to yield me the best money? And all you do is that. People aren't stupid. We can feel when something has a passion or a commitment or an authenticity behind it. I mean, there's many things I've done in my life where if I'd done it more ruthlessly or more laser focused, I'd have made more money, but I wouldn't necessarily been as committed or as happy.
Right.
And you creating a podcast. I mean, I've done podcasts. I've done things like, the show. And in the beginning, like you, I created it with absolutely no expectation of anybody really liking. I kind of started it for me. And the first couple of episodes, I probably had one or two people, and it was probably back then, there was a few friends who felt sorry for me, paying attention. But with time, people are so used to flash in the pans, right? So when they catch wind of somebody, they're like, yeah, right, here comes another, hot shot. But if they see you keeping, consistently investing in the area, and you keep doing what you promised, see, authenticity is huge, but I think a lot of people really, really respect integrity and that sort of consistency where it's like, wow, that person's actually doing what they said they were going to do with no expectation. It's not like they're doing to give with no expectation. It's very endearing.
Yeah. And I think that comes, I mean, I've been in sales for the last 10 years, but ironically, I really hate being I feel like I'm being sold, right? I hate that feeling. I hate the hard sales pitches. So I think with all this stuff, I kind of almost did a 180 and just didn't want to sell anything for the longest time because I hated it being done to me or feeling like it was done to me. But I think over time, so I think one of the biggest hurdles I had to realize is, it's not about selling per se. It's just about helping and figuring out what the needs are. And then if you have a solution that makes sense, then why not help? Right. But it was definitely a big
Too
hurdle
many,
to
too many,
start to monetize.
too many salespeople try and manipulate you into something, and they tend to forget that consumers have a cooling off period. We have the right to to cancel a deal or do certain things. Depends where you are in the world. But to your point, nobody likes to be pushed. We like to be drawn in. I mean, but everybody. I know you say you don't like being sold to, but I'm curious. I've been to stores and I've met salespeople who aren't what I would call traditional salespeople. They're like storytellers, or you walk in and then suddenly you realize, wow, this person really, really knows what they're doing. And the next thing you know, you're just enjoying the entire experience. And you end up buying whatever it was you were looking for. And they made the whole thing a joy. And you walk out there going, that was it. That was great. Like, it's the antithesis of that horrible kind of slimy, scummy feeling where you feel like somebody's just kind of manipulated you into buying something. And it's just,
yeah,
there's the difference between it.
You know what it was for me? Like I was on a lot of, like, when I was first learning, right? Like I was on a lot of webinars. I mean, maybe same thing with you, or like meetup events. And all it was sales pitches. I'm like, I never want to be that person that has like one main goal that you can tell. I mean, like, I want to just be able to educate people. And, I was always, and same thing with my real estate, it's always the long-term play. Right. But it took me a while, probably, in the past 2 years I've gotten better, but it took me a while to like even, think to put something as a course, right? To put some, but, ultimately I'm happy that I did, because I believe that I've helped people, meet their goals.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. A lot of people go, well, if I don't help like 1,000 people or 10,000 people, then I'm a failure. It's like, well, hang on a sec. Where'd you get that idea from? I figure if I can course correct someone, just one person's life, with teaching them something so they avoid some pain or some hardship, then it was worth it. Now, of course, I like the fact that when you create these things, they're incredibly scalar and extraordinarily leverageable. Like on one of the channels where I publish, which is Udemy, that's an interesting channel unto itself, and a podcast well unto its own right. It's all about that. But I've got something like 32,000 students in the last 5 years. And each and every one of them in some capacity has benefited from some of my training. And I don't take that lightly. I've always felt that teaching or coaching or counseling or giving anybody advice on any subject was actually more about the individual who's listening giving me something rather than the other way around. I've always felt that it was an honor to be able to advise and coach. It was more of a thank you. I always felt very grateful for it, because
no, you know what, I agree. And being able to help students buy their first investment property, or put better systems and processes under their tool belts, make better connections. I mean, like, that is really cool, because at some point, this is horrible, but like, buying the next house is not as exciting as buying your first or your second or your third, right? Like, once you get to a certain amount, it's just like, okay, what else is there? But it's cool to see, I know, right? Yeah. But it's cool to see, like, somebody that's getting into it, or really like developing some new processes, or getting that first like investment property. Like, that actually is way more fun for me at this point in time than like my next
it's like that high you get when you're first learning and you get all excited. I remember the first time I wrote a piece of code and I compiled it all, and it did exactly what I wanted it to do. It was just like, yeah, you get that real high. And then after you've written millions of lines of code and you've developed, I don't know, you're still happy that it works, but it's not the same. So when you start teaching someone, and like you say, and they have that moment where you see them get excited and they get that little high, you can kind of sort of, it's almost, you're benefiting, or you're getting the same thing through that. What's the word for that? It's I can't remember right now, but
excitement by association. Yeah, I don't know, I just made that up.
that's a good explanation. It's it's great. I enjoy watching it. That's the part I like. It's when the lights come on, and they go ding, and they get it, and you're just like,
no, it is cool. It's definitely rewarding. I mean, it's more exciting for me to see other people exceed at it. And I'm like, well, you know what, I started 7 years ago, I'm here today, but somebody starting today can be even further than me in 7 years, as an example. And that's, I mean, it's super exciting to see the progress, for sure.
Exactly. It's time is a flexible construct, and it's completely dependent on the individual, the way they spend their time, what they do, what they don't do. I mean, like you said, it took you 7 years. Some people are like, oh, I could never do that in 7 years. Well, maybe not. Some might do it in 2, and some might do it in 17. I don't know. It doesn't matter, just so long as they do some of this, like create these things that support their future. Because if you really do rely on a single source of income, you are pretty much guaranteeing at some point, I guarantee someone's going to take that away from you at some point in your life. And it's going to take you many months to get back on the horse. And if, like most people, you're servicing debt and you've got life expenses, it's going to drain any reserves you've got. And if you're lucky enough to have reserves, great. And if you're not lucky enough to have them,
yeah, I mean, it's important to diversify, right? So, I mean, most of us have our real estate investing portfolios, whether it's short-term, long-term rentals, et cetera. I mean, flipping. And then separately, I mean, even if you're just starting, like, I want to go back to that idea of cooking. Like, I would love to like just even learn the basics, right? So
boiling an egg, that's actually quite tricky.
But, at the end of the day, it helps with the ups and downs, right? We don't know what's going to happen in the market, the real estate market as an example, but it's nice to have like an additional, few sources of income from different things. And it may not be real estate related, but it's just that other like tool in your belt or income from a different source that you can have so that you can quit your job sooner and, and live a little bit more passively. So that's really cool.
I mean, I'm not knocking jobs because I've had plenty and I think they're great. But I remember a long time ago, you just said JOB, and I remember what somebody told me JOB stood for.
Yeah, I know, right? Just over broke.
It's like, oh, yeah, that's not fair though. But I mean, it's. No. I mean, I've got lots of friends who've never done sort of an entrepreneurial thing in their life, and they have put in their time and they've saved their money, and they've retired, and they are just laughing. They're like early in their 50s, the house is paid off, they're getting a nice chunk of change showing up every month, and they're like, yay. And now they're actually kicking off their side hustles. And one of them I know is actually wants to do something creative. So they got into creating dolls and toys. And they taught themselves through YouTube, no less. They went out and bought themselves a sewing machine, and away they went. And it's, they're not, they haven't made a ton of money yet, but I think somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 in their first year, which was enough to pay for a really nice vacation. They didn't need the money.
That's awesome. And side hustles, I think, are the way of the future. I mean, right now, look at how many people lost their jobs, unfortunately, or on unemployment. And we don't know what's going to happen, right? Down the road. I mean, even in 5 years from now, we could have something else like this happen. So it's just important to diversify, to be able to say, like, I don't have just this one source of income coming from my employer, but I can take control over some of this on my own. And you can do it while still working full-time hours.
Actually, I'd like to say one thing about that as well. And that a lot of people go, well, I'm going to need thousands of people buying whatever. And it's actually, no, you don't. One of the things they used to say on the internet, and it's changed actually in the last few years because everything's changing so quickly. They used to say you only needed like 1,000 people in your contact list, and you'd be set for life. Not 1,000 every month or 1,000 every year, but 1,000 in total. And the reality is, okay, yeah, sure. But you can actually launch a very successful side business, side hustle, something that either, you're trading time for money for, and that's fine, or creating something that is digital or a combination thereof, creating something that's a bit more scalable. And you don't need more than a handful of people. I mean, if you had a particular skill and you had a bunch of people and you thought you could teach this for $500, which by the way is not a lot of money when you're creating a course. A lot of courses these days are selling for thousands of dollars. But say you do something for say $300 or $400 or $500 and you get 10 people. Wow, there's $5,000. Like, and then rinse and repeat. I mean, you don't need to do it very often to make a significant chunk of change. Mm-hmm. And if you've got 100 people or 200 people, very, very quickly, the numbers start to stack up. And, it's like, it's exciting. It actually becomes very addictive, sadly.
But, and I think it's the wave of the future, right? Like as people are staying home more and going out less, because even if things resume to normal down the road, it's going to take some time, and this can happen again, right? And then what, right? So it's
not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
It's always been if. Sorry, when.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So one question for you is, you asked me to, I want to know what this means, but what's the Decimas Rule?
so earlier I was making mention of having multiple streams. And so, the word decimal means in tens, right? So
Mm,
my Decimus rule is you've got to always try and create a portfolio of at least 10 streams, because the Pareto principle says 80%, 20%. Then at least out of those 10 streams, you're going to probably get 2 that go away and 2 that grow. So you're looking at about 6 that are probably going to be stable at any point in your journey. So my Decimus rule was always that you've got to try, and for every finger you've got, try and at least create a revenue stream. Now imagine if each one of these was worth like a couple $100 or $500 or 1,000, like $10,000 is
mm.
pretty much, most people are set.
Yeah, and I've always heard the number 4 for some reason, but you're 10xing it basically, and you're saying we're
This
doing
is
10
safer.
streams of income. Yeah, but and it makes sense. Now here's the question. I don't know if you know this answer, but like, is one
Mhm.
stream of income real estate, or is one house one, and then your second house is the second, and your third one is your third, or is real estate kind of bunched up in one, and then your courses are another one, and then your like paper assets are the third one?
I would look at them closely. I would probably treat all of the real estate as one stream, but I would also treat the independent properties, because they're not going to be the same,
Right.
right? They're going to have unique challenges and so on and so forth. And then other revenue streams within the model would be something I'd probably consider, like I said, real estate to be a big stream in itself and made up of sub streams. The only reason I look at 10 different streams, and they don't all have to be 10 completely different markets. Like many cases, mine are like books and courses, right? That's the category. So I would say, yeah, you're probably looking at one stream per house or one stream per small portfolio, maybe, as you say, any of the other financial models that you put in place. But I'd just try and diversify a little bit, mostly because if anything happens to the real estate industry, it's going to affect all of the streams that are in that category. So that
Mm-hmm.
would be the only reason I'd split it up. I wouldn't, this is just my general rule of thumb. I wouldn't really want to try and put too many into say all of them, but that's just me.
Yeah, like as you're saying this, what I'm thinking probably makes sense is like real estate could be bunched into one. However, like for students that work with me, there's going to be your nest egg strategy, and then there's going to be your
Mhm.
quicker cash strategy. So maybe there's 2, right? One is like your
Yep.
your burr strategy or whatnot, and then you hold on to those, and then you get the cash flow, mortgage pay down, appreciation. And then your second one might be you're doing some JVs, and those have like 5-year exit strategies where then you can have some quicker cash, or 3-year strategies or whatnot. And maybe
Yeah,
so that
absolutely.
real estate gets split into 2 of the 10. And then your third one is, maybe your paper assets. And your fourth one is, I don't know, maybe you take your RSPs and you loan it out on mortgages as an example.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably get into to 10 pretty quickly. But I do agree with you. It is important to diversify as much as possible, because if one thing gets cut, at least you're not stuck, right? And it is really cool to say that you've quit your job and you are in control of your finances, and you can live the life that you want. I mean, that, it's the goal, I guess, for many people. So
Well, that's freedom, right? And a lot of people, when you talk to people that haven't really sat and thought this through, and you say, what do you want? And they'll say, oh, I want to be rich. No,
mhm.
they think they want to be rich because they think a ton of money will actually solve their problems. Sometimes it does, most of the time, if you know what you're doing. But usually, if you ask and you listen properly, what they want is the freedom of choice. I know a lot of people who are very successful, and they could have stopped working years ago, but they do it because they love it. They now have the choice. It's like when you get up in the morning, do I get out of bed because I have to, or do I want to? And then the other thing is, it's like, what's your number? Say, I want to be rich. Okay, well, what's your number? I've actually figured out that my number is about $2 million in cash. Great if I get more than that, but
Mhm.
$2 million cash sitting in a bank somewhere. I could stop working the way that I traditionally work, and I could live off the interest if that's what I wanted. Now, that's just me, because I don't have particularly high costs or anything else. And that number may change as things are going, but you never know. But
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be lots and lots and lots. And that's, by the way, that's another neat thing. $2 million in the bank will throw off a certain amount of interest. But if you create a handful of courses and they're throwing you off $1,000 a month, well, if you annuitize that back up and apply that's the equivalent of sort of an interest payment, it's like I've got somewhere in the order of about $500,000 worth of, it's the equivalent of about $500,000 worth of money sitting in the bank on one sort of course stream.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how pretty much the same deal. And I get to create more courses. It's just like throwing another $100,000 in the bank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing all of this information. I mean, I could keep asking you questions about this, but ultimately we'll move on to the next part, which is our lightning round. So I'm going to switch these questions up a little bit just to, make it mix into the topic that we discussed a little bit more. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. Sure. You can give me the first answer that comes to mind. I mean, you can expand a little bit, but keep it short and sweet. Ready?
Got it.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite book that talks about side hustles or creating this type of income or business book?
Multiple Streams of Income by Robert G. Allen.
All right, awesome. I don't know if you're a podcast listener, but do you have a favorite podcast?
Seth Godin's podcast, I believe. Although I haven't listened to it lately, so I don't even know if he's still doing it. So, but yeah.
All right, awesome.
I've been too busy.
Number 3, what is your favorite pastime? What do you do for fun?
Oh, this is going to sound really lame. I actually like to program. I really do. I take on challenges that I wouldn't necessarily get paid to do, and then I try and write code to solve it. So it kind of, teaches me new things that at some point I get to use in the future. But yeah, and I like to ride.
Ride what?
Motorcycles.
Okay. I was like, bicycles. All right, cool. All right, number 4. If you lost your money and your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
Hot dog vendor.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. Or a short order cook. I like to cook, right? See, so I probably would go and become a short order cook, and then I'd take the money and buy myself a hot dog stand, and then I'd leverage up and get a chain of them. And I've given some thought to this.
Interesting. All right, cool. Number 5, if somebody has $50,000 and they want to figure out how to create passive income and more streams of income, what do you think they should do with it to start?
Don't spend it. Because a lot of people, they get silly when they have money, right? The best thing about creating a course is to try and create a course with literally no money spent, other than buying the basic equipment that you might need. If you've got a phone and a microphone, you've pretty much got enough to start. Build it. See if you can get a bunch of people to try and buy your course, and then spend some money, maybe making it better and making some advertising, but don't spend that money on your course, not initially. Figure it out the hard way, because you will then be so much smarter about how you spend that money, and you'll know where and what to spend it on.
All right, awesome, great advice. Where can listeners find out more about you or reach out to you?
JamesBurchill.com.
All right, cool. Any final last words of advice? Anything else that you'd like the listeners to know about?
Yeah, I know maybe the idea of creating a sort of a side hustle or an online course or anything, a book, something digital might seem a bit overwhelming, but I would strongly encourage you to spend some time. If you say you don't have time, I would simply say ditch some TV, because most people have time. It's just a question of prioritizing. And as Sarah and I said earlier in the interview, this isn't a question of if, this is a question of when. And if you are able to create a small stream and it throws off $200 a month, $300 a month, that's a bill payment, that's a car payment, and then just keep doing it. It's incredibly addictive. And I would so much like to see everybody at least create one side hustle, something just to add a little extra money, because it starts to make you believe that freedom is possible. Because I'm here to tell you, it really is. Well, she knows.
Yeah, it really is. Awesome. Thanks so much, James. Thanks for being on the show. And guys, the different streams of incomes, and I like your 10. Figure out what your 10 streams of income are. And, it doesn't have to be tomorrow that you're going to create all of them, but build towards it and get started. And I'll tell you that, whatever happens to different markets, the real estate market, if you have something else on the side, you're going to be much more comfortable. And, I think that was a big thing. Like, yes, I've replaced my income with real estate investing, but I'm very strategic, and I look at risk very carefully. And if I was going to leave a job and it was just my real estate, I mean, it's good, it's doing well, but I needed to have that additional cushion to boost it back up, to say, okay, if something does happen and, I'm quitting my job in the middle of, the whole pandemic right now, essentially. But ultimately, it's because of those additional streams of income that I'm like, my portfolio supports itself, it's going to support me. That's great. But in the bad times, I'm still going to have some other additional options to help me, keep going. And I'll tell you that like, that is a big reason. It's, it's a great thing to replace your income with real estate investing, and your short-term cash flow from Airbnb really helps. Obviously the cottage really helps in a few different things. And that's, that's one thing, but plan for the bad, and plan for the downturns as well, so that you can take the waves.
Good advice.
Awesome. Anyways, thanks very much, James, for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larbi. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest.